want to talk about The Hangover because
Yeah.
it was was it an important part or a junction in your career? In your
Oh
life?
yeah, that's nicely put. Like I was gonna quit. Yeah, like I remember I was
Seriously?
doing a play and I was like, it's just not happening, because I really wanted to be I loved it so much, and I just knew that I wasn't. I was making a living, which was a miracle. Which for the first 3 years, I was like, this is amazing, and then I was like, I just want to be like just like 3 days on a movie, and you're not, and they're like, thank you, and then you're gone, and you're not really experiencing it. And I wasn't really getting any other roles that were substantial. And I met with Todd Phillips 6 months before. I met with Todd Phillips like in the fall for The Hangover, and then it was gone. And the truth is, I think they had a cast, but the budget was too high. So they said, if you make it with a smaller budget, we'll do the movie. And then I was doing a play at Williamstown called The Understudy by Teresa Rebeck, I remember. And then I got an email from Todd Phillips, and I was like, whoa, how did he get my email? And then he was like, let's do this, bitches. And I was like, is this a joke? And then I went from there, and then we went and we started shooting. We went to Vegas like that fall. I never would have gotten Limitless if I wasn't a part of The Hangover. Yeah, that changed everything. But when we were making it, we didn't even know if we were making a comedy or not. I mean, we were so many nights we'd be like at Rayo's, like that Italian place, like me, Zach, Ed, and Todd eating, and like, Mr. Chow just jumped out of a trunk naked today, and like, what is this movie? Like, what the heck is this movie? And we were all living at Caesar's Casino, which back then was it was on the downslide. It only had a resurgence kind of after the Hangover trilogy.
Yeah.
And so we're like in this kind of, not seedy, but like, Vegas. And I remember being in an elevator and I hadn't taken off the tiger claws. And I still had the shirt on because we were like going back for a second, like all bloody, and no one even looked. Like no one, it was as if walked right through the lobby, sharing an elevator with somebody, they could care less.
The chemistry with you guys was just incredible with
man.
Zach, and how much you talk about the kind of not knowing what the film was, but how much freedom did kind of Todd give you guys to find that and to play with it and to push the boundaries of it?
Todd is like, he's so charismatic and such a pro and knows exactly what he's doing. So it was structured, I mean, he spent a lot of time writing that script, and he's very, he has a thing that he wants. So it's much more structured than you would think. That said, you have two killers in Ed and Zach and Ken Jeong as Mr. Chow, and so there was room for improvisation, and we would certainly come up with scenarios on the day all the time. And Todd's one of the things I learned from is just how dexterous he is, during the shooting process. So yeah, there were things that came up, but also he had written such a great script. But Zach, Zach, I don't know what he channeled in that movie, but it was like hilarious. It was the whole thing,
It was that line of it being so dark.
Yeah.
But so
well, he was
funny.
so committed. Zach, Alan was just. He was so committed to that guy. It was hard for me not to see Alan, as Zach as Alan after that.
And the idea that this story kind of went on and we got more of it as well. I mean, that was, I imagine, off the back of the success of that first film there, not going into it thinking that it was going to be a franchise in a way.
Right. One thing I remember, like, the one thing we did come up with was this idea of, like, that Alan is obsessed with Phil. That was something that Zach and I came up with. That he's just like, it's like, that was really funny. So we were constantly pitching Todd ideas about just how obsessed with Phil he is.
Were you starting to watch at this point and really kind of take in sets? You talk about on that first set for, going to put with the cables, the lights and stuff. But by this point, you'd had experience and you're on film sets now. Are you starting to kind of watch?
Yeah, I started. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, I started during. I was so lucky to get cast in a television series called Alias. Then that's what moved me to L.A. But I barely worked on that show. I didn't know anybody in L.A. at all. And I would just stay on the lot until they kicked me out. And I would literally, because I would like just stay, and like JJ was kind enough to let me just watch, and I would watch every day I wasn't working. Then when they would wrap, I would then ask them if I could sit in the editing room, and I would just sit in the back of the couch and just watch them work. And then I would get everybody's dailies and I'd bring them home. These are when dailies were on VHS tapes, and I would watch because I just wanted to learn. I would watch these actors, how they were working in front of the camera. I remember my mom saw like the first episode. She'd say, Bradley, you're way too close to the camera. You got to go. They got to back up. Your face looks so distorted. I was like, Mom, no, that's my face. That's just the way my face looks.
When you were making those choices and whether you're, by this point, you still have to audition after the Hangover films?
Oh my gosh, yeah. The last audition I remember was to play Lucifer, and they were going to do Paradise Lost, and I did it. I taped it in my kitchen, and that was the last thing I remember auditioning for. But definitely have gone on meetings on stuff. Yeah.
Because that idea of kind of off the back of something like The Hangover and how successful that was of making a conscious effort to do something completely different, take a left turn, take a right turn, and so that you're not being kind of typecast and you're not going down one route, and your choices have been extraordinary, and the variety of roles that you've played is quite brilliant. And I wondered if you were consciously kind of going, I can't go down that road, I really want to go this way.
It was only through experience. It's funny you bring that up, because the character I played on that television show was like the nicest guy in the world. And when I would audition for other things during that time period, the feedback would often be like, who knows if the feedback was real anyway, but they would be like, Brad, he's such a nice guy. He's a nice guy. He doesn't have enough edge for that. And I was like, what? And then all of a sudden, when I was lucky enough that David Dobkin cast me in Wedding Crashers, which was like the opposite.
Yeah.
And then after that, the feedback was, well, he's kind of an asshole, isn't he? Truly. And I remember thinking, like, I got to make sure not, to keep, as Elia Kazan said, if you're going to audition for a cowboy, show up with the horse.
That's amazing.
I think he said that.